Hello everybody and welcome to Watch Dan. Today I'll be taking a look at the Seiko SKX007J1 and the Orient Mako II. But before I get started, let's have a look at this bad boy. In the spirit of Japanese watches, I'm rocking the Casio F91W today. An excellent watch that I recently reviewed for a great price. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I think today I'll start with the Orient. I picked this up back in 2019, and it has been worn and loved. As you can tell, there's quite a few scratches on the mineral crystal. This brand Orient was founded back in 1950 in Japan, but its roots actually date back to 1901, so it's a very old watch, very old brand. And back in the quartz crisis in the 70s, when Seiko and who else was it? Seiko and I guess Citizen were making quartz watches. Orient stuck to their guns and continued making these automatics. So I paid around 150 bucks for this watch, maybe a little bit less. And there's really not going to be much better out there for the price. It's an excellent watch. It's very reliable. It's keeping time at about plus 10 to 12 seconds a day from an in-house movement. So it's a great alternative to the SKX, especially now that the SKX is discontinued and the prices are through the roof. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's jump into it, guys. Let's take a look at this thing, huh? You can see it has sword-style hands, Arabic numerals at the 6, 9, and 12, and then indices, and all numerals and indices all have lume in them, and the lume is quite good. I'll make sure to get lume shots later. The bezel is aluminum insert and has a little lume pip at the top here. The bezel action is firm and a little notchy, kind of hard to turn, to be honest, especially if your hands get wet, but there is very little back play, and when it lines up perfectly. Very nice. The crown side, you can see the crown has the Orient signature on it, very lightly engraved in there, kind of a slab side, and a nice polish to it too, with a satin finish on the top. I'll get a down the barrel shot here for you guys. You can see the crown is inset of the case a little bit. It does not really affect usability of, the bezel is inset from the case side, which does not really affect usability. It's a little harder to grip it on the sides, but if you grip it on the top here, it's okay. The bracelet tapers from 22 millimeters down to 20 millimeters and has hollow end links. Now it does have solid links and it's quite comfortable. It's kind of an oyster style bracelet. And one nice thing you get on this, you actually get an applied Orient logo, which is hidden behind the hour hand there. And you also get a framed out date window with the day and the date, which is polished. And it's very nice. There's a lot of little details in this watch that you get for the money. And I'll be sure to get lume shots, and I'll also put it on my wrist a little bit later for you guys so you can see. The clasp is stamped and bead blasted, stainless steel. It says it right on the back. Closes with a nice reassuring click, and the fold over is very nice, very sturdy, not going to go anywhere. The links are held together using, I believe, split pins, not pins and collars, but split pins. So a step down in that regard, but not a big deal. Have never had an issue with a split pin coming out on its own, so that's great. Let's see. What I'll probably do is just show you a few more shots of this watch, and then we'll go into the Seiko, and then I'll take the bracelets off so we can take a peek at the case backs. The crown on this, it's a little small, a little difficult to turn. Once it gets going, it's not so bad. And it pops out, and then you're good to go. You have hand winding, which is a little bit on the gritty side and kind of hard to turn. And then when you finally do get it threaded back up, which is a little bit of a job, it takes a little while to actually tighten it down because the knurling on the crown is not particularly pronounced. And when you tighten it down, it just wants to keep going, and it keeps going, and it's not easy. And when you finally think it's tightened down, it's got a little further to go, and it indents your finger. So whatever, 130, 140 bucks, not a big deal. Again, it's very reliable, it's comfortable, and it's a great watch. It's one of the first automatic watches that I bought. I believe I bought this after I bought the Invicta Pro, and after my daughter dropped it and broke it. This was my only automatic for a short time. So I wore this out when I worked, and actually had a couple of Rolex owners say, man, your watch probably keeps time better than my watch does. And I think they had some older Rolexes that probably needed servicing, but 10 to 12 seconds fast a day is not too shabby. That is the Orient Mako II, guys. I'm gonna set this down. We'll take a look at the Seiko. Now this watch is legendary. It came out in 1996, so I was about 12 years old. And I had a buddy who told me that the only way to get an automatic was to buy a Rolex. And I was completely unaware when I was younger that automatics were the only type of watch for a long time. So Seiko pioneered the field in affordable automatics. This watch was originally around, I want to say, $100 to $200. When I bought mine back in 2019, I paid $300. And now they are going for anywhere from $800 to $1,000, which is insane in my opinion. You can get a lot more watches for that money. The bezel, since I've worn this watch to the beach quite a bit, is difficult to turn at this point. You can't turn it at all when your hands are wet, but when your hands are dry and you can turn it, it just takes a lot of effort. So I may pull this bezel off and try to clean it at some point. And then in typical Seiko fashion, it does not line up perfectly. But you know what? That's okay. It's a Seiko. That's kind of honestly how they're supposed to function. The bracelet on this watch is a Super Jubilee Angus. It is very beefy, very heavy and very solid links in here. And they are affixed by screws. The strap that came with this watch was the Japanese version, the J1 version rubber strap, and it was not comfortable at all. So I bought the StrapCode Angus Jubilee and the StrapCode Super Jubilee, and the Super Jubilee tend to pop open on its own, so it may be defective, but I switched to the Angus and it's very solid. A little down the barrel shot, guys. You can see the case back is kind of a bubble, or the case side's kind of a bubble. Tapers inward as it goes down. It had a very nice polish on it when I bought it, and I've used it quite a bit, so it's kind of scratched up. The knurling on the bezel is excellent. It's kind of a double knurling. It's a really big, thick bezel. Mineral crystal is very scratched up. The first scratch that I got on it, I was very bummed out, and then I got a bunch more scratches, and now I think it just adds character, so it's not such a big deal. The crown is huge on this watch, and it's down at the 4 o'clock position. It's easy to turn, a little difficult to grip just because of the way the crown guards are made. But once it's out, it's out. There's no hand winding, there's no hacking. So to start this watch, you have to shake it for quite a while, and then it starts right up. It's kind of like bump starting your motorcycle. When I go to thread this crown back in, it's hit or miss. Sometimes it almost feels like it's cross-threading, which is a little frustrating, but once it does thread up, it's easy to turn and easy to lock down because it's big. It is not signed with anything, but it's a nice crown. Let's take a look at this bracelet, huh? It's a real thick clasp. It's actually kind of hard to open sometimes because it's so big and chunky. Once it's open, you can see just how robust the Angus Jubilee swing arm is, and the fold over, and also the clasp itself is very thick and heavy duty. It can't be closed by pressing. You actually have to squeeze the two locking mechanisms there, and then it locks into place. And a very heavy-duty clasp and bracelet. Again, affixed by screws. They have kind of backed out on me a couple times, but I just tightened them back down and we're good to go. The one nice little feature here, the bezel is aluminum insert here. They put a little piece of mineral crystal right over the loom pip so that that can't pop out, because on the Orient, you can actually feel that loom pip up there, and if you bang it hard enough, you know, it's just loom. It may come out, but not so on the Seiko. You have Seiko automatic printed, divers 200 meter, and below that you have 21 joules, which is a telltale sign of a J1 model made in Japan, as opposed to being made in Malaysia or China or Vietnam or other countries where they make these if you don't get the actual Japanese variant. But it's a great watch. It will remain in my collection for a long time, and I have no plans to sell it. So what I'll do now is just pause this real quick, guys, and I'm going to take these bracelets off so we can get a good look at the case back, because that is one of my favorite parts, especially of the Seiko. So I will be right back. And we're back. First things first, let's take a look at this Orient bracelet, shall we? You can see it has a nice engraved Orient logo right on the clasp. It has solid links. Everything's stainless steel, so nothing's going to rust on you, fortunately. Yeah, those links they're actually very heavy duty. It's a heavy duty bracelet until you get to the end links, which are the chintziest end links I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's unfortunate because it does give it kind of a like a jingly rattle, and it's definitely noisy. But I think StrapCode makes a bracelet for Orient as well. So I'd recommend replacing this bracelet. If you do that, you got yourself a really, really nice watch, guys, for a really good price. I think StrapCode charges less than $100 for their bracelets. So kind of a win-win. Let's have a look at this Orient watch head, shall we? Let's see if my camera will play ball. Ooh, I got a nice close-up today. So that black on there is kind of, it's not a sunburst, it's kind of just a matte black. But the sword hands on this thing are actually really, really nice. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of this brand and this watch. I'd like to get my hands on some other Orient watches to check them out. I think it's a good alternative to a Seiko or a Citizen watch, honestly. And it's just cool. It's been around for a long time. So, owned by Epson, which is actually called Seiko Epson. These are corporate cousins, not brothers or sisters. Where Seiko Holdings, I believe, owns Seiko watches, and Seiko Epson owns Orient. So corporate cousins, and that's as of 2017, if I'm not mistaken. You can see it's got a nice Orient logo engraved on the back. Automatic, movement Japan, 200 meters water resistant, and stainless steel. So very nice, just your standard case back tool removal there, nothing fancy. A single hole drilled in the lugs, and that is just about it. Orient Mako II. Let's have a look at this StrapCode bracelet, shall we? This thing is a beast. This is the heaviest, most solid bracelet that I own. I don't know what Miltat is. That may be the company that manufactures it, or just the name. I really don't know. But you can see just how chunky those end links are. Very chunky, but nicely milled and very solid. It's got a good solid feel to it. You know, it's not rattly at all. It's very heavy duty. Unfortunately, neither of these bracelets, the Orient nor the StrapCode, have a quick adjust tool for the bracelet or for the clasp, but they do give you plenty of micro adjust holes there, so that's real nice. But just take a look at that. Look at that thing. It's so thick. Even the little swing arm is real thick. All right, let's take a look at the Seiko watch head, shall we? Let's look. Try to get a little closer up view here. This also is not a sunburst. It's kind of just a matte black finish, but it's maybe a little more reflective of a finish than the Orient, which is more of a matte finish. And then if you flip this over, this is probably my favorite case back other than my Omega, and that's only because you can see the caliber 8900 through the Omega. That tsunami is awesome, and it protrudes quite a bit. It sticks out a little bit. It doesn't bother your wrist, but it just looks so awesome. And good on them for you know, tying such a historic brand to such a historic tsunami wave. And this one is labeled with scuba divers on the back because it actually is a scuba diver's watch. And that brings more than you might think to the table. I've seen people light these on fire. I've seen them pour them into chlorine. I've seen them run over them. People have abused and tortured their poor SKXs on purpose, and the watch just keeps on going. So I think the scuba moniker requires the watch to also be extremely durable. So these watches can take a licking and keep on ticking, no problem. All right, well, that's all I got in that regard. Let me pause this and I'll be right back for some loom shots and some final thoughts. We'll be right back. And we're back. This 42.5 millimeter Seiko SKX on my 7.5 inch wrist. You can see it's a big, bulky watch. It's very tall. It's made for people with larger wrists, but the lug-to-lug measurement is actually short enough that people with smaller wrists can wear it no problem. But it fits me pretty well. It feels very solid. It feels very well made. It feels like you could run over it and it would be fine. And let's take a look at the Orient. This one is 41.5 millimeters on my 7.5 inch wrist. You can see it's a little more svelte than the Seiko. Still a big watch, but again, the lug-to-lug is small enough to fit smaller wrists. So it's a little thinner case, and it's going to slip under a cuff a little bit easier than the Seiko would. But they're both great choices. If I had to choose, I mean, for $300, yes, I would take the Seiko over the Orient. For $1,000, I would take a Christopher Ward over the Seiko, and then I'd still have a little bit of money left over to buy the Orient. So I'm not sure which one is actually the better watch between these two. I know that the Seiko you can abuse the heck out of it and it'll keep going. I'm not sure exactly how durable and tough the Orient watch is, but I can tell you I have beat it up pretty good and it's never had an issue, and it also keeps better time. So let's move on to some loom shots. I'll be right back. Okay, we are in the dark room, and here's the SKX. It's so bright. I mean, it's so bright you can read the logo on there, no problem. It's one of the brightest watches that I own currently, and I would say that maybe the Janot is the only one that has it beat, which is just a great testament to how good the Janot is. But this is excellent, and it's a green, I think it's Seiko Luma Bright is what they call it. And it's probably the same loom that you find on the Orient, although this one does look a little bit darker of a green. But you can see that the Orient has excellent loom too. And just look at those sword hands. This one does not have loom on the seconds hand, which would be nice to have. You know, you want to be able to see if your watch is still ticking even when you're diving, but not the end of the world, to be honest, for the price. Not a big deal. I'll put them kind of side by side as well as I can here for you guys. The Seiko is definitely brighter, and the loom does last longer, so maybe it is a different formula than the Orient, I'm not sure. But both excellent watches, guys, at night. Legibility is top notch. You really can't beat them. Okay, well, I really appreciate you guys watching today. Please give me a like or subscribe if you see fit. And until the next one, we'll see you guys a little bit later. Bye now.